will join us, but I do want to respect the fact that especially our West Coast friends have woken up early to be here with us, and we'll get started. So my name is Nikki Silberman, and I'm so excited to welcome you all to the meeting this morning. So you are at the membership meeting for the Simulation and Physical Therapy Education Consortium, so hopefully you're in the right place. If you weren't intending to be at this meeting, we would still welcome you to stay and join us, because we're really, really excited to have this meeting today. So I'm just going to make sure I can advance my slides, and there we go. So a big, big welcome. This is the first membership meeting that we've had. This is the first year of our organization. So we are thrilled that we were able to pull this together and have this membership meeting today. So I just want to introduce some people that are here in our meeting. So as I said, my name is Nikki Silberman. I'm the current chair of this consortium, and I'm a faculty member and the director of clinical education at Hunter College. And I have been working in simulation for, I don't know, about 10 years or so plus, and learned so much from many of the people that are here in the meeting today, and so excited to continue to get to know everybody and to continue learning with and from so many of the people that are members of our consortium now. So I just want to quickly go around and allow all of the members of our board to introduce themselves. So Sherry.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for being here today. My name is Sherry Kiami, and I am the vice chair of the founding board for SIPTEC, and very excited to be here with everybody. I am an associate clinical professor at Northeastern University, and I teach in the neuro rehab portion of the curriculum primarily. And I have also been using simulation for 10 plus years. I want to say closer to 12 or 13, actually, if I'm being truthful. And so it's always been a passion of mine, and I enjoy helping other faculty at Northeastern develop simulation pedagogies for their classrooms and to meet their learning objectives. And again, just very excited to be here and looking forward to meeting everybody.
Thanks, Sherry. Sharon?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Gorman. I'm professor at Samuel Merritt University. I've been using simulation in education 13 years. I don't want to do math. I'm on the West Coast. It's early for me, so you'll probably see my coffee cup, which, oh good, the virtual background. You can't see it until I drink it. And I might have to have my cat on the screen. I have 2 kittens, so apologies in advance if kittens are being annoying. Welcome.
Thanks, Sharon. Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Rucker. I am a clinical assistant professor at KU Medical Center in Kansas City. I think kind of similar to you guys, I've been probably doing simulation for maybe about 10 years. My background's in acute care, neuro rehab, that kind of stuff. So I'm one of the nominating committee members.
Thank you, Jason. Tara?
Hi, I'm Tara Pierce. I'm an assistant professor and a director of clinical education, and I've been using simulation for about 6 years, so I'm one of the newbies to simulation, and my background's in acute care and neuro rehab.
Okay, great. And Susan?
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Miali. I am a clinical associate professor at Stony Brook University. Been using sim for maybe 5 years now. We were kind of doing activities that were sort of sim, and then really researched the guidelines and said, you know what, we can make this true simulation. So I kind of come from a background of doing more classroom-based, lower cost simulation. So that's kind of my area of interest in sim, but welcome. It's good to have everybody here.
Great, thank you. And I just want to also welcome Michael Sheldon, who is our liaison to the ACAPT board. So if you want to just say hello quickly.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Sheldon. I'm currently the Associate Provost for Academic Affairs at the University of New England. I've been at UNE since 1990, so I'm in my 30th year there. Spent 20 plus years as the program director, and had an opportunity to move into the office of the provost a couple of years ago. I'm currently serving my 2nd term on the ACAPT board, this time as the role of vice president. And in my liaison role, I have been heavily connected to the post-summit clinical ed summit work. And simulation kind of came about as an offshoot of that work. So that's how I got originally connected. I know Nikki's planning on talking about sort of the history of how you came to be. But let me just introduce this comment. They submitted a knockout proposal to form a consortium. So we're really excited about the work. Obviously, it's incredibly timely, accelerated so much, right? And what we've been all dealing with in the last several months. So very happy to be connected to this group, and welcome to all.
Thank you, and thanks for being here, Michael. So before we get started, I also want to recognize some people who were extraordinarily helpful and influential in getting this consortium together. And while they're not officially on our board, we would not be here and we would not be having this meeting today without these people. So I know several of you are here. So I just want to thank Jackie Bradford, Daniel Dale, Kristen Greenwood, Kelly McCauley, and Carol Rucker-Hughes, who have just been wonderful pioneers in simulation education and physical therapy, and helped us put together that proposal to be accepted. So just thank you, thank you, thank you so much for all the work that you did to help us get here. Okay. So as Mike said, I just want to share a little history of where this came from. In about 2014, I think Carol Rucker-Hughes and I were having a conversation at either ELC or CSM, and all these conferences kind of meld into each other, saying, well, there's one of us at each institution that's doing some work in simulation, and we're all kind of recreating this same wheel. And wouldn't it be great if we could collaborate with each other and have somebody to talk through things and help us figure out what we're doing and help us learn this new approach that we're adding into physical therapy education. And kind of over the years, we got a few more people interested. And one of the things that I know we're all sad about not being live are those hallway conversations that we have when we're running in between sessions at ELC, because I think that's really where some of the true work it really happens. And so over the years, a lot of this conversation was happening, running through hallways between sessions at CSM. And in the last year, there was really a huge uptick. So if you can remember, there was just a ton of programming on simulation at ELC 2019 and at CSM 2020. And several of us just said, this is the time. And we're really ready to get this moving forward. There's really a need here now. So all of those people that I just recently thanked and the people that are on our board got together very quickly after CSM, and we put together a proposal to the ACAPT board that was submitted in February, and they met in the spring and approved our application in June to form a consortium. And things have moved so quickly since then. You know, we got the letter of, yes, you can be a consortium. And we said, okay, now what do we do? And so this incredible group of people got together and we appointed a board in June of 2020. And we were live on the ACAPT website for people to join us in July of 2020. And as of yesterday, we have 94 members of our consortium. So I really just had no idea what to expect when we put this out there. And if there was ever a question as to whether this consortium was needed and people were interested, I think the fact that we have gotten 94 members to want to join this conversation in such a short period of time really speaks to the need that people have and that people want to be engaged and involved and helping people advance simulation education in PT. So I really thank all of you and kudos to everybody who is here. I think we had 44 people register for this meeting today. And given that we are in a conflicting time spot with a lot of other really exciting programming, I think that also speaks to the fact that people really are interested and this is the time. So thank you again. Just as a little recap, I want to share our mission statement, and this was some of the information that was put on our founding documents. So kind of who are we and what are we doing here? So SIPTEC, the Simulation and PT Education Consortium, represents institutional members of the Academic Council of ACAPT who have a strong interest in simulation as a pedagogical approach to the education and professional development of physical therapist students, residents, fellows, and clinical educators. And I really want to emphasize that last bit, that we are looking at simulation, not just within our PT programs, but really across the continuum of practice. We are not looking at any specific mode of simulation. So our purpose really is to promote best practices in simulation learning, but across modalities. So for those of us who say, well, I do high fidelity, I do low fidelity, I do this, I do that, right? We're all doing so many different forms of simulation. And I think, as Mike already alluded to, in our new remote and hybrid learning worlds, we are exploring doing telesimulations, or however else you want to refer to it. And our consortia really wants to support the work in all of those modalities across that continuum. So one other just logistic thing as we go, I do want to try to keep this meeting somewhat casual. So if you have comments, questions, things along the way, please feel free to enter those into the chat. We'll be doing some breakout rooms shortly to have some nice conversation, but I do want to encourage people to put their thoughts out there. So with that mission, we did have some founding objectives and what our initial thoughts of what we would accomplish. And we're going to be continuing our work in strategic planning. So these are just our initial thoughts of where we would go, but this is very moldable, depending on what people are interested in. So we want to provide a forum for physical therapy education programs to share resources for development of simulation-based learning. And this was really one of the important founding objectives as to why these conversations started, is that each of us felt like, well, there's one, maybe two people at my institution that are participating in simulation-based learning, and I need some help, I need some resources. So this was definitely one of our strong founding objectives. We would like to promote best practices for use of simulation learning as a teaching and learning experience, exploring methods of formative and summative assessment to prepare clinical students for clinical experiences and ongoing professional development. We want to assist members with advocacy strategies to create and sustain their simulation programs. We understand that this is hard, and simulation does involve a lot of both human and material resources. And often you have an interest in something you want to do in your program, but you need to find a way to really advocate for that and have discussions with the chair of your program, with your dean, with your provost. And so we're hoping that our consortium can help people develop those advocacy strategies to be successful delivering the experiences that they would like to do. One of the things we are also hoping that we will accomplish, and I'll speak about this a little bit later, is to provide opportunities for grant funding so that we can collaborate on research endeavors. We know that there is a growing body of research in simulation-based education, and the typical N is 30 because that is the size of our individual PT programs. And we realize that we do need to start doing some larger multi-site research and collaborating with each other. So we're hoping that eventually this group can be a source of funding for that. We'll see. Put in my plug. We want to create a conduit for academic and clinical educators to partner to improve student preparation. We understand that, our goals when we look at students in our program is to prepare them for clinical experiences. And in order to do that, we must collaborate with our clinical educators to know what their expectations are. And many of our clinical educators are using simulation in their clinical settings as well. So we want to make sure that that collaboration continues to grow. And finally, we want to expand the use of simulation in promoting interprofessional education. And I know this is something many of us are doing already, and we're hoping that this group can help to expand that. We have already had conversations with the National Interprofessional Education Consortium to try to collaborate some of our efforts with that other group, because we do recognize that there's a lot of overlap between our various consortia. And so it's important that we have these shared conversations and work together. So we do not have a vision statement, and that's why you're all here today, or part of why you're all here today, is that we really want to know from our members what you see as our future and where you see this group going and how we can help you in your needs as a simulation educator in the future. So we are hopeful that we will start gathering information today, and we've gathered information from our survey that we sent out already to start to put together our vision statement. I see that Mike Sheldon has his hand raised. Mike, if you want to speak for a moment.
Yeah, thank you. I thought this might be a good time to add this perspective too, and maybe before you guys go into your breakout sessions. Nikki and the leadership team knows that when they first came forward with the proposal, and you may know from the business meeting yesterday, ACAPT is actually going to be moving into its new strategic plan phase coming up this year. The current strategic plan phases out in 21. Mark Reinking just took over as the new president, so we're going to be engaged in a strategic planning process, and we will be seeking feedback from all the consortia and other stakeholders within ACAPT. Personally, I've been connected to the NCCE as the board liaison for several years now, and I really view them as a model for how consortia help to leverage the work of ACAPT. Some of you may know when the initial post-clinical education summit work started, that consortia was not, it was certainly in its early stages, and it's really evolved into a body that's taken over a lot of the work in the clinical education arena. So our default now as a board, when things come up, instead of forming new panels and things ourselves, we basically delegate that work to the NCCE. And given that fact, you know, we've been considering, is consortia the best structure for this? Because again, consortia are typically conceptualized as structures for groups of people with similar interests to get together, to talk. They may produce products, but that may not be their primary function. So we're definitely looking from the ACAPT board's perspective to leverage the energy and work in helping to advance the strategic priorities of the organization as a whole. So we've had that conversation. I see Nikki nodding her head. So hopefully, like, yeah, we've talked about this. So moving forward, I just want, as you kind of look at your vision and what you envision yourselves to do in the future, I wanted to kind of put that ACAPT board perspective, you know, if you hadn't heard it before, just so that you're aware of what the board's thinking of, because we definitely are going to be looking for this group to kind of help leverage. And as you know, a lot of that work has resulted not only in presentations at meetings, as Nikki alluded to, but publications in peer-reviewed journals. It's established position statements and you know, things that we're all agreeing to do as an organization, member institutions and so forth, what should be in curricula, all of those kinds of things. So think big, you know, as you move into your visioning conversation, and know that the ACAPT board is really looking for this group to do work. And I think you're all kind of rolled up your sleeves already and are looking to do that. But we'll definitely be looking to partner with this group when things come up in this arena, not to sort of form separate groups to do this work, but to really look to this group to take the leadership in those projects. So I'm happy to entertain any questions if anybody is wondering, again, like what I'm talking about. But I thought this might be a time to interject that before you move into your breakout rooms.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate that. And, you know, the idea of thinking big, I think this is definitely a group that does that. And I do want to encourage people to think creatively. And this is a time, you know, the ACAPT board has their ear open to us. And I think we're really in such a wonderful sweet spot in being able to say, you know, this is what we want to do. And so I'm really hoping that there's creative input from people here today in the meeting, and we can really use this as a wonderful platform to move forward, knowing that it's a transitional time within ACAPT as well, that they're looking for new projects. So I really like the support and the encouragement, Mike. So thank you. So I just want to summarize some of the results. Some of you here may have filled out a needs assessment survey. We sent this out in early September, but our membership has grown. So I apologize to those of you who are here who may not have seen our needs assessment survey, but we wanted to get this out in time for us to start planning for this meeting a little bit. So we had, I think it was 41 people complete this survey, just trying to find out, what do our members want? What are you interested in? And we put together a whole list of ideas and asked for open-ended questions to find out what were the topics that you'd like our group to tackle as a first question. And as a second question, we asked, what are the priorities for the first 1 or 2 years? So I just want to highlight some of the findings from this survey, and, kind of similar to what we were expecting. You'll see that a lot of people said they are looking for some way to share resources, right? So online methods for assessment was a big one for a high need and a need for this group. Online resources for developing experiences, online resources for a repository of cases. So people are looking for resources so that we don't all need to do this alone. And then also looking for resources related to interprofessional education. So I don't think that this is surprising to anybody that these are some of the things that came up as a need or a high need from the members of this group. Oh, and there's the cases. There they are. So the other thing I would like to, bring up here, my little clickies didn't work, sorry. Developing grant funding was something that came up, and we're not going to be discussing it so much today. So I just want to put out there that we don't have a budget yet. We're a new organization. So it is definitely something we're exploring. I don't want people to think that because we're not discussing it today, it's not a top priority for us. We have been putting together a proposal that we're sending to the ACAPT board for their consideration. So I'm hoping within the next several months, we'll find out if this is a possibility and if they'll be able to support this. So I don't want to ignore that that's there. Some of the other things that were interesting on here were some interest in creating mentoring, and a little bit less in terms of virtual journal clubs or some in-person meetings. So really the high needs were about building those online resources. But then when we said, what are the things that you want to happen immediately? And the priorities for the next 2 years, and I ranked these by priority. So you'll see on the right-hand column, they're kind of ranked as what did people say was their top priority. There was definitely some overlap, right? So we still had building of all of those shared resources and the building the online location for cases. While it was a lower item on the need and high need, it actually popped up a little higher when it came to the priority list. Okay, so these are some of the priorities that people really wanted to accomplish within the first 1 or 2 years. So in a few minutes, we're going to be splitting up into breakout rooms to discuss, well, what does this really mean? What does this logistically look like for you? So when somebody says, I would like an online location for a repository of simulation resources, what are you looking for? How would that be formatted so that it would be useful information for you? How would you like to access that? What kind of information are you looking for? So we're going to have some discussions about really what this means so that we can move forward with this work. The other thing that came up, and I'm grouping these 3 items in one category of professional development, was an interest in webinars on simulation and PT education, an interest in creating mentoring opportunities, and on educational programming at ELC. And so we kind of are grouping that into a conversation on professional development needs. So that's one of the other conversations that we'll be having in our breakout groups. So again, here was the grant funding. The other thing that I thought was interesting was the resources specific for interprofessional education. While they were recognized as a high need, they were not recognized as an immediate priority for the first 1 or 2 years. So I don't want people to think, oh, why aren't you speaking about needs for interprofessional education in your breakout rooms today? It's not that it's not on our list of something that we're hoping this group will eventually accomplish, but we really wanted to focus today on the things that people told us were their priorities for the first 1 or 2 years of this group. So that's kind of how we are forming or seeing our discussions today. So what we're going to be doing, and I'm almost on time, doing pretty well, we're going to go into 4 breakout rooms. We have 33 people on the call, so I think that'll lead for some nice group discussions. We wanted to have small enough groups so everybody can really share their thoughts and ideas. And so these are the topics that we're hoping will get discussed. But as Mike mentioned already, think big. If there's something that wasn't on that list that you think this would be an incredible thing for this group to accomplish, or this is something that I really like to see ACAPT addressing, please share your thoughts today. So we're going to have you in 4 groups, and Sherry, Jason, and Susan and Tara will be facilitating those discussions, and we'll have about 45 minutes for some small group discussions, and then we're going to regroup for the rest of our business meeting to kind of share our thoughts and cover a few other topics towards the end of the meeting. And I see there's some things going on in the chat, so I just want to know from Sherry and Sharon, is there anything else we need to address before I put those rooms together?
There are currently no questions in the chat. There was just a couple comments.
Okay. So if you'll be patient with me for 1 second, I just need to make sure that Jason and Sherry are in different rooms from each other. Breakout room 2. To breakout room 3, the fun of Zoom. All right. Move to breakout room 4. I think we're good. I'm going to open rooms and we'll hope that this works. And I'm going to stay myself in this big room. So if anybody's still here, we can chat.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.
I don't know the language of simulation. Even Susan, when you were talking about high fidelity versus low, I'm sitting there going, maybe you need to give me a definition, but I didn't want to say that. But anyway, so that we would have a way that just like you learn development or anything else, you have a step-by-step process, and someone could come in at any place and feel comfortable moving through the system, and then either using very high level simulation or less. And I'm going to be in a program, this is a brand new program in a very underserved area, and we're not going to have a lot of money to develop some of these fabulous simulations that some of you are using. So I'd like to know what I can do with less money to develop good quality simulations.
That's great. Thank you, Elaine. Sherry, you want to share from your group?
Yes, so we actually, within our group, there were a lot of great ideas, and just very similar to Susan's with developing a repository for cases. We said the same things about having it searchable under different terms and have it based on outcome or learning objectives, level of learner, diagnoses, practice pattern, those types of different components. But then also Macaulay had a great suggestion for making sure that we have a peer review process in place before they're deposited in the repository, make sure they're really rooted in sound educational theory, that they have been piloted and tested and are effective, and that if they are published in our repository, could this count as scholarship? And I thought that was a really great idea, that could provide some motivation for doing this and sharing our cases. We kind of acknowledged, or I brought up the fact that sometimes in academia, people can get territorial and, maybe not wanting to share everything, but, we're all trying to support the development of our students as best we can. And, you know, we need to be efficient and not recreate the wheel. This is a great way for us to kind of promote sharing best practices and really soundly developed and run simulations that can also help us faculty with scholarships. So I thought that was a great suggestion. We also talked about maybe trying to make some of these virtual options with gaming and escape rooms, make it fun and interactive for students in the virtual environment, that could be helpful too. So thinking about including possibly some of those in this repository. And we also talked about listing some of the resources for places that already have some cases, such as SimuCase and Virtual Clinician and PhysioU. So looking to just include those on a resource page, perhaps. Other resources that our group thought would be helpful would be on like theoretical foundations and developing sound pedagogy. How do you use SIM? Is SIM the best method for achieving your learning objectives? Sue Grieve brought up a great point that if, you know, just because you can do simulation, should you? So really thinking about and exploring, is this the best pedagogical tool to meet your objectives, you know? We had some faculty that are new and trying to get a simulation center up and running, and they thought it would be really helpful to have a list of resources and job descriptions. How do you support the request for resources to develop a simulation center? And I thought that was a great idea. You know, what do you need as far as technical support? How many people do you need faculty-wise to run an effective simulation? What other resources besides time and maybe scheduling support and technical support do you need? So just a way for faculty to access some resources to really justify and support the need to include simulation in their curriculum. And then job descriptions about, you know, what a director of simulation might do, or a sim liaison, what their roles and responsibilities would be. And I think, let's see, we really did not get to methods of assessment. We were having such great discussion on the other topics, but we briefly spoke about professional development and how it would be really helpful to have some way to match mentors and mentees. So put in a request for people who are experienced and stating what areas they are experienced in as far as their experience with simulation, and then matching that up with people who are looking for mentorship around their area of need and development. And we also talked about the fact that we have webinars planned, and if anyone has topic ideas, you know, we'd love for people to email us to let us know what sort of topics they're interested in. We really didn't get that far. We were having a great discussion on all the other aspects.
That's awesome. We covered so many topics in a short time. And I know that this group could talk for a long time and create so many ideas. So, and I know you took notes. I'm sitting here frantically taking notes as you're reporting out, because it's so exciting. And
I took notes too, and I'll share them later. But also, if people have ideas for webinars, maybe we could have them put it in the chat, and just, you know, different topics or ideas that they would like us to provide some professional development and programming around. That would be really helpful for us planning our next topics.
That'd be great. Okay, thank you so much, Sherry. Jason, you want to share your group?
So we spent a lot of time talking about outcomes as well as some other stuff, and kind of as was mentioned with the cases, a repository of outcomes that was searchable in many ways, whether that's by kind of the competency that is assessed, the diagnosis, the type of outcome, kind of maybe potentially modeled along like the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, or what the I think used to be called Rehab Measures database looks like, with potentially normative values, and not just PT, but expanding that outside of PT. So outcome measures that might be used by nursing or medicine or OT. So not just looking within the realm of PT, but trying to expand out to promote IPE and make that a little bit easier and get buy-in from other professions. We definitely talked about ways to kind of networking, know what other people are doing, know how other people are doing simulation. So we talked a little bit about a combination of a repository and a support group. So just ways to know what other people are doing, get resources, you know, how are people using their resources, things like that. We also talked a little bit about the need to build things across programs. So whether that's research, building research across programs, being able to share resources and those kind of things. So really we mirrored a lot of what was said in the other groups, it sounds like. And certainly if anybody else in the groups would like to, the group that I was in would like to add to what I've just said, absolutely, please do.
That's great. Thank you, Jason. I've just had to smile as you were talking when you said the word support group, because this is my support group right here. So, so yeah, we do need to be that for each other. That's awesome. Tara, you want to share from your group?
Yes. First, we do have a question in the chat about information or access to webinars scheduled. And I will tell you, Nikki, do you want to address it? Would you like me to?
Yeah, I'll be sharing information and a link in a little while about one webinar that we have planned. It's just the one so far, but we're excited that we have that coming up. So after we finish this discussion, I'll have a slide that comes up and we'll be sharing that information. We don't have any others planned, so we are looking for ideas. But yeah, I think Sharon, you were going to share the link to register in the chat. Yeah.
I was going to wait till we got to that in the agenda.
Yeah. Okay. Give us 5 more minutes.
Okay. So it's a good thing to keep you on the edge of your seats because Zoom is so exciting at this point, right? So from our group, I'm going to try to just jump forward to the topics that weren't discussed. We want to talk about the elephant in the room in this searchable database that's really organized and has a standard template that everybody has to do. And that's the cost, because we want to also be able to search it based on what kind of cost we can spend on doing that simulation. So we think that that aspect is a very important thing that we need to just be really upfront about. We also came up with the idea of developing a think tank that could both develop new cases and also do some type of peer review process and a timeline to ensure that all the cases in this repository are reviewed and they're current for current practice, so that as things get old, that they're pulled out of circulation type of deal. So we feel that as we develop this, we do need to consider that. The idea of a brainstorming networking so that we could connect on, pretty much all of us had simulations scheduled during the pandemic, and we've all had to figure out what in the heck do we do now? And so getting a quicker, more efficient way for us to collaborate and communicate and brainstorm would be an awesome suggestion. So to have some kind of discussion board or something to that effect. Another aspect that we brought up is that maybe it's the consortium that brings it to ACAPT, but a concern was brought up in terms of how do we address, as we are looking at creating this repository, getting liability and permissions covered if there are video-based cases, so that we've got that aspect looked at and addressed, because that is definitively a bigger picture type of conversation to have. And so utilizing the resources that this group has to be able to do that. We talked about some of the bigger picture components in professional development, some of the easier ones on we need a common terminology, and maybe it's not reinventing the wheel, but maybe it's coming forth with here's the glossary, and this is one of the first things that we put out so that there is continuity among the conversations that we're all having. Why couldn't we, in this Think Big component, create our very own certification process on simulation? I mean, why do we need to go to an outside organization when we've got all these great experts within physical therapy? And wouldn't it be more meaningful to create our own training process to train others, and even have a list of people that could come out and serve as consultants to areas or organizations as they are developing their own simulation? Because we know simulation's not going anywhere, but why not use PT experts to create for PT students? Let's see. We spent some time talking about sharing methods of assessment, and it's that we all kind of feel like there's modifications made, but not necessarily any validity done on reliability of those outcome measures. And so we want to make sure that we spend some time knowing that the outcome measures that we're creating are valid and reliable, and then sharing those outcome measures. And then also tagging this component of utilizing simulation. Once we've got these solid assessments, can we then look globally at incorporating simulation as part of the requirements and making some recommendations through various organizations within ACAPT to CAPT on utilizing simulation as part of clinical education, either for remediation purposes, for integrated clinical experiences, or for a component of an actual clinical education course. But we don't really have the evidence right now to be able to take any recommendations like that forth to any other body to represent us at the table with CAPT. So we went all over, but it was a great, rich discussion, and that was fantastic.
Thank
But
you.
anything you want to add, please jump in.
Yeah, and this is just incredible. I think I brainstormed a little bit on what I thought might be part of today's conversations, but it's just so exciting to me to listen to some of these ideas. And just going back to what Mike Sheldon said to us in the beginning of the meeting, is that ACAPT wants us to think big. And there's incredible work to be done in this field, whether it's this idea of certification or, I love the idea of having a peer-reviewed process. And is this something that can contribute to our scholarship, right? So I think there's so much work that can be done with this group. And what's going to happen after this meeting is we're going to take all of these ideas and start putting this together to work on our strategic plan and create our vision and try to prioritize some of these, but get the wheels moving into some actionable projects. Obviously everything's not going to happen in the first year, right? But I think that there's some really actionable ideas here within the group. So what I'm going to quickly do is transition to Tara and Jason, who are our nominating committee, to talk a little bit about some of the work that is coming and that we hope will come, and ways that you can hopefully be involved. So Tara and Jason, if you guys want to talk for a couple minutes.
Nikki, can you share that slide on what we've got coming up? So we know that everybody on this call is absolutely sitting around right now going, gosh, I have so much free time that I've never had before. Let me get involved in something. I will tell you that, I mean that sarcastically, we know that everybody feels the pinch right now of trying to juggle everything in this new normal, but we would absolutely love to talk to you and tell you a little bit more about how you can get involved in the SIPTEC. So these are the positions that we have coming up for nomination. The chair is a 3-year term, and ultimately what I should say is, as this board gets up and going, everything will be converting to a 3-year term. And that's typical for ACAPT consortiums, but because we're brand new, we're starting off kind of slow, and then we'll be rolling into 3-year terms. So we are looking for individuals interested in being our chair, the vice chair as a 2-year term, the secretary is a 1-year term. And then we have 3 members of the nominating committee, a 1-year term, a 2-year term, and a 3-year term. We would absolutely love to have you guys get involved or tell us that you're interested. So we've got a link to a website and a QR code that you're welcome to scan. You can also email either Jason or myself and let us know that you're interested in getting involved in a board position. We also are very interested in hearing from you if you're willing and able to participate in any of the committees that we may form as we get this online repository together, as we start looking at assessments. So basically, feel free to use whatever resource. I'm cool with carrier pigeons. So we just want to know that you're interested in working with us, and reach out and let us know to what extent you are. So Jason, any other thoughts?
No, I think one thing I would simply mention is Tara mentioned committee work. We haven't formalized committees, so if you have an idea for a committee that we should have, please let us know, because we're certainly open to doing that. We have some ideas, and if you're interested in those, by all means, but if you have other ideas that we haven't mentioned, please don't be hesitant to suggest them.
All right, great. Thank you guys very much. I think definitely out of some of these topics that came from the discussion groups, there will be several committees with work to do. And I imagine as ACAPT comes to us and says, this is work we'd like your consortium to do, there'll be opportunities for committees to be started in that way. And they will definitely need people to work and people to take on leadership roles. So please, please, please contact Jason and Tara if you're interested in getting involved. We're going to switch gears just for a couple of minutes here, and I want to introduce Brad Stockert, who is the chair of the ACAPT Strategic Initiative Panel on Simulation. For those of you who may not be aware, ACAPT started several strategic initiative panels that followed the Clinical Education Summit, and somewhere along the lines, this idea of investigating more about simulation and PT education came out before this consortium was formed. So we've invited Brad as the chair of that panel to come and talk a little bit about the history and the work of that panel and some of the preliminary recommendations that that panel has come to, because I think that the work of that group is likely to inform the work of our group and kind of get tied together a little bit. So I did see that Brad was here on the call, so I want you to please unmute yourself and introduce yourself, and the floor is yours, Brad.
Thank you, Nikki. Well, thank you for having me, everyone. Is there any chance I can share my desktop?
Sure, I will stop share, and I need to just give you that ability. So hold on one sec.
Okay.
I'm going to make you a co-host.
Thank you.
If this was yesterday's meeting, I would say you've been promoted.
Are we good? Do you see my slides?
Yep, go
Okay,
ahead.
so I'm representing the Strategic Initiative Panel on Simulation and PT Education. We've been around for about 2 years. We're trying to finish up our task. These are the various committee members, and I would say a very large proportion of them are in the audience today, and I want to thank all of them for their contribution and say that this is not my report, this is the panel's report. And we were asked by ACAPT to address these 3 charges that you see on the slide in front of you now. We were asked to investigate and describe the current use of simulation within PT education and other health professions. We were asked to describe models of best practice for the use of simulation and to explore the role of simulation to meet accreditation standards and required elements. We are partway through meeting those charges, and one way we addressed those charges was to do a couple surveys. So we sent out one survey to all PT programs. We got back 143 unique responses, giving us a very robust response rate. And we used those responses to identify the person at each program who was most capable or most able to respond to a really long survey about various elements of their simulation program. We received 81 completed surveys, but we had 105 people who filled it out at various levels. They may not have answered every specific question, but a lot of the questions basically had 100 people responding to them. So once again, a very robust response. So the sample that we got, we felt was representative of all the PT programs in the US, geographically, public, private, all those various demographics seem to line up pretty well to suggest our sample is representative. And of those roughly 100 or so programs who responded to the second survey, 92% of them reported some form of simulation in their PT program. So it is being used quite a bit. Now, I don't really want to go into all of our findings, but I did want to highlight a few that really touch on what you were just talking about. So the largest number of faculty primarily responsible for simulation coordination received their training from an institution or were self-taught. These are, we have no idea what this means, but we know it draws into question standardization of training. And roughly a third of faculty are reporting all of their training was just whatever they picked up on their own. 21% of faculty responsible for simulation reported they didn't have any training. So when you look at those first two lines and you talk about how simulation might be done nationally, I think we have a problem with our foundation because the level of training is not consistent across programs. 1 in 5 have faculty running simulation who have no training. Many institutions did not have a single faculty member with any level of formal training. So the panel members were really concerned about this, and this is one of the things I brought up to the ACAPT board when I met with them on Wednesday, was some real concern about the training of faculty. Not that they're doing a terrible job and should be stopped at this moment, actually quite the opposite. It's that they're missing opportunities to do a better job with the same amount of effort. So what we found was, after identifying all these problems with training, we asked them what they thought of and what they thought were barriers to doing simulation. And only 25% of them reported a lack of training as a limitation, even though 40 to 50% of them admitted to not being trained in various elements related to simulation. So there's a little bit of disconnect between standardized training that everybody in a certain area might have versus what's happening in simulation. BP stands for best practices. Best practices for the use of standardized patients, and those are published, they're out there. There's an association of standardized patient educators who put out best practice patterns, but those are rarely or never followed by 20 to 25% of respondents who report using standardized patients. Best practice patterns for debriefing were not followed by 43% of respondents. And when I mentioned a moment ago that I thought a little bit of training could go a long ways, this is the particular element I'm referring to, that many of us in simulation consider debriefing to be one of the most beneficial learning experience of the whole simulation, and yet 40% of the people aren't doing it correctly. So it isn't that they need to start all over, but rather if some of these individuals had a little more training in debriefing, I'd say they get a lot more bang for their buck, that the simulations they're doing, the students could get more out of them from a more formalized debriefing that follow best practices. You guys were talking about learning objectives and assessments. Assessment of learning objectives is only occurring in about 57% of programs, and only about 37% reported any use of a standardized outcome measure. This is an area that really needs to be addressed in simulation. They're doing it, but they're not assessing it. They're doing it, but they're not following best practices for debriefing. And these are ways that we can elevate the amount of learning that occurs during a simulation and then document it. So those of you who brought up the idea that assessments need to be improved and finding more objective, more robust assessments, that's exactly how the panel kind of sees it at this point as well. And I think that's all. I have other information, but I didn't want to dwell too long on the particulars, but I wanted to give you some highlights that seem to relate to many of the topics you were talking about. If you have any questions, at least half of the panel members are in the audience. I think between all of us, we could give you a pretty good response.
Thank you so much, Brad. And I do want to just give a couple of minutes here if people do have questions at all about the work of that panel or any of the preliminary outcomes. I will share that it is preliminary because we do have an ongoing literature review that we're wrapping up, and we're hoping to have the final report of that panel completed sometime in the spring. Can I say that, Brad? So we are hopeful that that work would be out and available for dissemination, but I do want to open up the floor for any questions that people might have or comments on the work so far. Okay.
All right.
All righty. So it's early. I know we've asked people to talk enough already today. So Brad, thank you again for being here and for sharing that work. I really do appreciate your time so much. So I'm just going to go back and share my screen again and get this up. Okay. So we wanted to highlight before we wrap up just a couple of upcoming events and things that are happening. There are some programs happening at ELC over this weekend, some that are live and some that are synchronous events that we're hoping that you'll be able to attend and join. So a couple of people that are here today are actually doing some of these presentations. So please take a look through. I will say, as you're looking through the agenda for ELC, that there's a lot of pre-recorded programs that are listed in the exhibit halls. I think there's about 14 exhibit halls. So I encourage you during your downtime to please go search through, because several of those recorded sessions will be available to you for a few weeks to come and do relate to topics on simulation. And so I encourage you to find some time. I know during ELC, it's sometimes hard to get to everything. And this is one of the benefits of doing ELC remotely, is that we actually have access to this content for a time to come. So I do encourage you to come and look for these presentations. And Tara, we wish you well in your live presentation that's coming up. And I'm sure that there'll be people here that will be there to support you and enjoy learning from that presentation coming up. So we also wanted to share, this is not our program, but we have a really nice relationship with the APTA Academy of Acute Care Physical Therapy. And I'm hoping that people do know that there is a conference coming up called Bridge the Gap. It's a virtual meeting this year. The focus of the meeting is on simulation in PT education from November 5th through 7th. So I know that's super soon. I believe that registration is still open and available. Sharon, I don't know if you have any other comments or a plug for that as a conference co-chair.
Registration is available right now. I think we have about 45 people registered.
Yay.
We have enough room to have 100 live participants in any one of the sessions, but everything will be recorded and will be available through the end of the year. So also feel like, oh, I can't make it, register for the conference and you'll still have access to everything as recorded asynchronous version.
Wonderful. So we're really excited about that program and hope to see many of you there. The other thing we are super thrilled to announce is that we do have a webinar coming up, and considering that we just started as an organization in July, the fact that we put this together, we're really excited about. So we have a webinar on strategies for taking simulation virtual, and Dr. Jackie Bradford and Dr. Susan Grieve, who are actually on the phone call on our meeting today, will be presenting. They both have a ton of experience and knowledge in teaching with simulation, but also have really been leaders and pioneers in teaching virtually with simulation. And I'm really looking forward to learning from both of them with their experience. And we pushed for this webinar to be soon. So it's Thursday, December 3rd. And we really wanted this webinar to happen this academic semester, because we know as we're all beginning to plan for the spring semester, and it's looking, unfortunately, like the large majority of our programs are going to be continuing in a virtual environment or on a hybrid model, that we're hoping that by doing this in December, it will give you some time to start thinking and brainstorming for your spring semesters and how you can effectively deliver some really great simulated learning in a virtual environment. So we look forward to seeing some of you there. And is the link for registering for that in the chat?
It is.
Okay, so you can look for that there. Wonderful. So that is our agenda for today. That wraps up our first membership meeting of SIPTEC. So I want to just again thank everybody for coming and for your support and your early just jumping in and joining our group. I think the discussions today are really going to lead to a lot of very interesting projects coming up. So we will continue to be active on our mailing list to keep you updated as to upcoming programs. We welcome your thoughts and ideas and input. So you have a link to our website here on acapt.org/SIPTEC. But also this is our email. So if you have some thoughts or, you wake up in the middle of one night with one of those big ideas, jot it down, email it to us. We're always welcome to everybody's thoughts on where we move with this. As a new organization, I think it's just an incredible opportunity for us to move forward and really meet the needs of our members. And with that,